Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 1387. Method. Behind the endless curtain of darkness, in the darkness with aqueous light ebbing gently, a young man with black hair, black eyes, a broad forehead, and a thin face suddenly sat up as though he had experienced a nightmare. Dressed in a classic black robe, he stretched out his right hand, attempting to take out a crystal monocle from the void and wear it over his right eye. But this time, he didn't obtain anything. His right hand paused in midair for 2 seconds before he retracted it and pinched the right eye rim. At this moment, he heard a gentle but emotionless voice. To him, there's something more important than life. To you, apart from yourself, there's nothing worth caring about. When the matter develops to a point where one's life is put on the line, it would imply your loss. The corners of Amon's mouth curled up as though he wanted to smile and reply, but he ultimately didn't say anything. The voice continued, "Born as a mythical creature, your lack of normal anchors is also a problem. This makes you know what courage and sacrifice are, but it's hard for you to understand." Amon's expression changed as he stood up from the slightly glistening darkness. He looked at the human-skinned glove that was thrown to the side before but seemed to be very happy. He retracted his gaze and curled the corners of his lips. "This seems very interesting. I plan to leave this place and enter the cosmos. That place is much more exciting than the real world. Perhaps I'll understand the 2 things you mentioned as a result of this. That's very dangerous. Once you enter the cosmos, and before I succeed, I won't be able to provide any help. However, this will let you avoid him at least." The calm and indifferent voice replied without any emotion. Amon didn't say another word. He raised his hand and pinched his right eye rim and vanished from the endless shadow screen. In the ancient palace above the fog, as Amon was completely obliterated under the power of a supernova, Klein couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. If he had a choice, he naturally didn't want to sacrifice himself to revive the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. He hoped to personally protect this world and seek out the meaning of life again. Of course, if he didn't have a choice, he wouldn't hesitate to awaken the celestial worthy. He was certain that he could do this, and Amon was also aware of this. Therefore, he didn't force him, and only attempted to escape. In the battle just now, it had developed into a battle of courage towards the end. The one who wasn't afraid of true death would yield the absolute advantage. Clearly, Amon wasn't prepared to sacrifice himself for this matter. After heaving a sigh of relief, Klein's face under the cold and bizarre mask suddenly grimaced. Under his translucent dark-colored cloak, the slippery and sinister tentacles that extended out were either hitting the ground or rising up high. It was completely out of his control. He could feel that the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings in his body was rapidly waking up, and it seemed like he couldn't stop it. Even if Klein directly died with his will and relied on the powers of a miracle invoker to revive, he wouldn't be able to escape, as the Lord of the Mysteries also wielded the authority of miracles. At that moment, Klein recalled the words of Dark Angel Sasser, which was also from the ancient sun god. "The primordial one had awoken in my body." In the next second, at the spot where Amon's body had shattered, beams of light were pulled by a vague, invisible form of gravity, as they charged towards Klein. Some were worms of time with 12 rings, some were insects made of resplendent starlight, while some were just large numbers of light dots. Klein wanted to stop the Beyonder characteristics from fusing with him, but the increasingly powerful celestial worthies will prevented him from succeeding. His body swelled into a balloon, and then suddenly became thin as paper. This repeated itself in an endless loop. The mask on his face became brighter and more bizarre. The slippery and evil tentacles that extended out from under his cloak increased and became more uncontrollable. One worm of time Beyonder characteristic, one key of star Beyonder characteristic, and one. Klein's mind felt like he was being devoured by an invisible monster, producing excruciating pain. Finally, a pair of eyes, which seemed to be formed from pure starlight, formed from layers of illusory doors and crystal monocles, rushed towards Klein's face, straight for the mask's eye sockets. Almost at the same time, the strange door of light that was tainted with bluish blackness appeared on Klein's body again. Sapphira Castle. At that moment, Klein, Sapphira Castle, Door's uniqueness, and Era's uniqueness, all had a strong inclination to congregate. Once they fused together, the Lord of the Mysteries would completely awaken and complete his resurrection process. Klein suddenly used his right hand to cover half of his face. His entire body bent down as if he was fighting with another self. With the anchoring and image disruption from his anchors, Klein finally slowed down the awakening of the Lord of the Mysteries' will, reducing the power of convergence by a little. The starlight eyes and the crystal monocle stopped in front of Klein's face, floating only a few centimeters in the air like planets revolving around the sun. Klein believed that he couldn't maintain this extreme imbalance for too long. Perhaps a few minutes or even dozens of seconds later, the convergence would continue without restraint, bringing about an unbearable change. Haha, this can be considered a form of fusion. Klein laughed in an unstable manner. Then he fooled the Trunso's brass book, allowing it to enter a sealed state and fly into the junk pile. Right on the heels of that, Klein left Sapphira Castle and arrived in the astral world formed from symbolism and authority. This place seemed similar to the cosmos. It was dark and vast, but in fact, there were many unique aspects to it. For example, even though there was a sun-like star hanging in the distance, emitting normal light and heat, if one tried to get close to it, without getting injured, one would realize that the astral world there was like a black curtain. The sun was directly painted with pastel colors, and there were a bunch of concepts and symbols surrounding it. Furthermore, the drawing of the sun wasn't that nice, like a child without any foundation in art casually scrawled about. It was both comical and frightening. From another perspective, this might be a manifestation of the chaos and madness that underlay everything. As soon as Klein entered, he immediately sensed invisible gazes. Some of them came from areas protected by the world barrier, while others came from broader areas with obvious malice. The corners of Klein's mouth couldn't help but curl up. He suddenly turned his head and looked outside the world barrier, raising his slippery and sinister tentacles. This pair of eyes that seemed forged from starlight and the crystal monocle also moved. All of a sudden, all the attention from the cosmos shrank back. Only the hand-drawn crimson moon was left hanging there as it flashed with light. Ha! Klein laughed as he came to a dark kingdom filled with night vanilla and slumber flowers. At the same time, the Evernight goddess appeared at the borders of the divine kingdom in a layered, star-speckled dress. Her face was covered in a translucent black veil. She didn't transform into her giant form as she looked at him at eye level before raising her right hand and revealing the bird-shaped, golden accessory. At the head of the bird-shaped, golden accessory, a series of illusory doors appeared in the bronze-like eyes, allowing a drop of colorless water that had a strong aura of eternal stillness to land on Klein's cold and bizarre mask. The will of the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings entered a state of eternal slumber. Likewise for a majority of Klein's consciousness. All he had was a tiny bit of lucidity. Under such circumstances, he made the mask retract, and he transformed the cloak into a black windbreaker. Then, he made the crystal monocle turn into a pair of black gloves, making the eyes forged from starlight to turn into a cane inlaid with star speckles. This was only a change in appearance, but it didn't change anything in reality. Once the two items were separated from Klein, they would return to their original state. Of course, if Klein stabilized himself, he could accommodate them and change their corresponding concepts and symbols over and over again, allowing them to change their forms forever. This can't be sustained for too long. It just delays the matter for a while. The Evernight goddess gently reminded him. If the river of eternal darkness's water is used repeatedly, the Lord of the Mysteries will awaken even faster. This is because he will trigger some unknown changes and adjust his condition. Similarly, the specialness of Sapphira Castle and my blessing will gradually be erased, allowing you to enter a state of eternal slumber. It was as though Klein wasn't discussing his own matters. He smiled and nodded. Got it, the Evernight goddess said in a tone that seemed to be comforting Klein's psyche. Regarding this matter, the method Amon used, and the actions he did had exceeded my expectations. He is indeed the true god of deceit. It's not that you have no chance at all in what comes next. You can first try to completely control Sapphira Castle and pull the will of the Lord of the Mysteries to enter a state of eternal slumber. In the dream, you can resist and fuse with him. I can bless you, but the most important thing is still left to you. Becoming a great old one doesn't have any rituals involved. No ritual can change the awakening of the primordial one's will, but the ancient sun god believes that the order to accommodate them can increase one's self-awareness to a certain extent, increasing the success rate of the matter. First become a sequence 0 of a pathway, then control and fuse with the Sapphira. Only then do you accommodate the other uniquenesses. That's the best order. Become a dual pathway true god and then controlling and fusing with the Sapphira is an order that isn't good or bad. Only fusing with the Sapphira at the final step will be the worst choice. Klein smiled and said, That's a good idea. As long as one wakes up, a Lord of the Mysteries will be born. This might be him or me. Yes, after completely controlling Sapphira Castle and entering a state of eternal slumber, I should be able to weaken the seal of the Western continent, creating a weak spot that allows one to enter and exit. The Evernight goddess didn't say a word when she heard Klein's words. Klein continued smiling. This is my choice. I had anticipated this day a long time ago. I will finally face him.